Hi, my name is Tammy,
And I'm Jen.
and they call us Woo. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show today. We are talking with Jen a little bit more because we talked a little bit about her mediumship experiences, which, of course, there's so much more to delve into with that. But we wanted to talk a little bit more about channeling, what the difference is, what it is, what experiences she or I have had. So we're going to talk about channeling today. Do you want to explain a little bit about what channeling is, Jen?
Certainly. So channeling, I actually had somebody ask me the other day. She thought this whole time that mediumship and channeling were the same thing. They're not the same thing. So as I explained before, mediumship is where you're just talking to people who've crossed over, people who are deceased. Channeling is actually the full embodiment of, so the person that you're talking to doesn't necessarily need to be somebody like that who's crossed over. It could be ascended masters, it could be angels, it could be somebody who has
Could
passed
you
on.
explain the Ascended Masters thing a little bit?
Oh gosh,
That's a
thank you.
very woo term that
Um,
I don't think everyone
that
will
is
know.
true. So ascended masters are people who have mastered their enlightenment while they were on this earth. So like Jesus would be an ascended master. There are like Buddha, people who have been on this path of enlightenment, path of ascension, and they have mastered a lot of the concepts, or they've mastered the concepts, and come to a place of forgiveness and peace, and are now teachers on the other side. So they've ascended in their own spiritual enlightenment.
They
And so
figured
now
it
they're
all out.
there. Yes, they figured it all out. Exactly. That's a much easier way to say it. Thank you, Tammy. Um,
They got King Koopa.
Master of the universe. Um, so they have come to this space of enlightenment, and now they're there to be teachers and guides for everybody else who's walking this enlightened path, this ascension path. So sometimes they will speak through people, and that's what channeling is. It's somebody allowing them to step into their body so that they can use their voice. So if I was channeling and let's say Jesus wanted to step in and speak through me, I would allow that information to come through me using my voice. But Tammy brought up when we were talking beforehand that there's distinct changes that happen when people are channeling. So I would say let you talk about that right now because I think
Okay.
it's important for people to hear.
Yeah. So I know you have channeled a few times for me, and to be honest, I mean, other than, some of the things that you see on TV or, movies, stuff like that, I didn't really know a lot about channeling at the time. But I know you incorporated a lot of everything that you know how to do in your healing sessions you would do with people. So when you have worked with me before, I know you had two people that have come forward. I cannot remember the name of the one right now, but one certainly I've heard more. But you said he's a talker. He likes to say lots of stuff.
True.
So I've heard it in sessions as well as I remember a time when we were both working in the same, space, and you were like, okay, I'm supposed to give you this message. And one of the things I thought was really interesting was one, both of the messages came through as a different language, but it was a language that it certainly had familiar characteristics to a Native American tongue. But I remember asking you about that afterwards and asking, what that was. And I'll let you talk about that a little more, kind of describing the ways that people have told you what it sounds like to them. And basically how some of these languages that you're using are really ancient languages or a conglomeration of languages. But I know I had asked you afterwards to say, okay, do you understand what you're saying? Like, do you hear what you're saying? Do you understand what you're saying? even if it's in this other language, and you had explained to me that you can certainly ask for like an English interpretation, but it's not always necessary, which I thought was really interesting. And I do remember the time that you just kind of grabbed me and said, there's a message that I'm supposed to give you. And you briefly explained that you knew it was a blessing and stuff like that. But when you were doing it, it felt like I didn't need to know. Like, I understood and I didn't need to know an interpretation of it. Like, I got all the information I needed from it, which I know definitely sounds woo. But it was true. That's the way I felt in the moment, is the English interpretation is not important. I already feel what I was supposed to take from this, if that makes sense. And at the time, I really did I needed support. I needed a blessing. And that was really what, was brought forward. So I thought that was really cool that one of your guides is just kind of always aware of those type of things. But channeling is interesting to me because we kind of talked about this too. It seems like something that would be very easy to fake, and I'll let you talk about that later. Yeah. And perhaps because I already knew you and I knew what kind of person you were, and I know how trustworthy and genuine you are, that I didn't have any distrust around that. But I could see how it could be something that people would be like, is this real? Is this really happening? And interestingly enough, actually, you've channeled more than one thing for me now that I think about it. You also channeled my higher self at one point, which was super cool, when I was really looking for guidance on my path. I think everybody goes through that sometimes, where they're like, what am I supposed to be doing? Like, I need a direct answer. Tell me what the hell you want me to do with this life. And it's not that you don't work towards all the things that you think you should be doing, but sometimes you just get that feeling where it's like, am I putting my efforts in the right places? I don't know. And that was super interesting, because I certainly got the message that I needed. It was not what I was asking for, but it was the message I needed. And that comes back to me all the time. That one was in English, and I think that was important because I needed to know that. And I don't know if my higher self just always speaks in English. I don't know. That's another good question for you. And then one of the other sessions that you did with me, it was a traditional Chinese medicine healer, a woman that came through. And that was the first time I had heard you channeling something in a language that I didn't understand, but also I knew immediately that it was not the same person that you normally, or that I normally heard from. It wasn't the same guide. And when I say person, I mean just referring to general entities. I know it's not necessarily a person per se, but, we can get into all that too. But that was super interesting because the mannerisms changed pretty distinctly from the guide that I normally heard from, who I feel is kind of gregarious and like, like, hey, let me tell you about stuff, just like kind of a big personality, to someone who seemed a lot more reserved, even in the way that your voice was. Because I wasn't actually looking at you when you did it. I just was hearing. And that's when we were working with some cord cutting and stuff. And I remember thinking, like, I'll have to ask her about this afterwards, because that's certainly not the entity that I'm used to hearing. It sounded very different. The tone of your voice, of course, the language sounded different too. The tone of your voice, but even just like the quietness and kind of meekness in the way that it was presented and stuff. And the times that I've watched you channel versus the times that I've just heard it, your mannerisms kind of changed too. And it's kind of, I think it's kind of cute actually. You do have like a tell when you're channeling, where it's almost like this little chuckle that you do. You're like, oh, as you do it. It's really cute. So it's obvious to me when I saw it that it's not you. There's somebody else that is speaking. Yeah. And I do think that people will have to suspend their disbelief a little bit, because certainly it does seem like something that could be a scam. I understand that.
Yeah.
But if you haven't experienced it, especially experiencing it with an open mind and thinking it could be possible, that might be the first step. It could be. We'll see, right?
Yeah.
And then really observe, like observe body language, observe tone and mannerisms. And like I said, now that I know you, you have a tell. I can tell when you're getting messages sometimes. I can tell when you start to channel because you are like you have stepped aside and it's somebody else. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? So that's my
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
And I probably gave you about a million other things to talk about now, but
That's okay. No, I don't get to see myself channel very often. I mean, when I do sessions with people on Zoom, I record them, and sometimes I have to go back and look at them to like write down homework or something that was given to somebody during the channeling. So, but it's very rare that I actually get to see myself channeling.
mm-hmm.
And I remember there was one session that I did um, probably a year ago, and there were probably 6 or 7 different, like there were some energetic collectives that came in. So um, uh, light energies, so groups of light energy that came in to speak through me. I
Would you
also
describe
channel.
that as like separate, completely separate beings? I know this is probably a hard one to
Yes. So this is
describe.
a hard one to describe. So it's usually otherworldly beings. So some people would say extraterrestrials. But it can also be like higher vibrational versions of ourselves. So again, I'm using terms that won't necessarily make sense to people, but like, so when you cross over to the other side, your vibration, so your energy signature shifts, you
Mm-hmm.
up level because you're now in energetic form. So you're at a different vibration, you're at a higher frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So different beings, different groups, different energies are at different frequencies. So when I'm channeling an energetic collective, it's typically higher vibrational, higher frequency groups of beings who are coming together to deliver very specific messages to people here.
Okay.
Um, hopefully that was brought down a notch and not too woo.
Yeah, I mean, what it sounds like to me is basically, you know, just like we have different levels we can get to here on this plane, there's all of these other planes of existence and different levels that they
Yes.
can be on as well.
Yes.
And this is
And
a group of entities on a different level. It's not a
yes.
person per se as we would understand them. It's a group of entities. Does that
Yeah.
sound right?
Yeah. So it's like
Okay.
a group of different people who are coming together with a very succinct message, and
Mm-hmm.
they have somebody who speaks for them. So there's like
Oh,
a
okay.
spokesperson essentially. You're channeling the energy of the collective, but there's essentially a spokesperson who
It's
steps
a board
forward.
of directors.
Yes. Yes, it's a cosmic board of directors. But so in that specific session, there were like 6 different groups who came forward, or 6, like I think one of my guides stepped forward, one of my clients' guides stepped forward, then there were like these other groups who came in. And I remember talking to my client about it afterwards and was told, like, oh my gosh, you should see like the changes in your voice and your mannerisms and stuff. So I went back and actually watched that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sat there going, oh, I didn't know about these people. Like, because sometimes I will step completely out of my body when I'm channeling. So there's 2 different types of channeling, and there's one where the channel steps completely out so that they're not aware of anything that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's one where you're still present, you're just in the background. So you're watching, you're interacting with whoever's speaking at the same time as they're speaking. So
Okay.
you're aware of what's happening, but it's not you speaking.
Okay.
So for a really long time, because I knew that it was hard for me to stay out of the way, I would just be completely absent. So I would have
Okay.
no clue what came out of my mouth, which was slightly terrifying because you're like, what is being said? to this person, and like you come back into your
imagine.
body and this person's bawling and you're like, I don't know. And then they ask you questions and you're like, I don't know. I don't know what was said. Like, I have no
It
clue.
wasn't me.
Yeah, it's like, I'm sorry. I don't know why you're crying. I'm so sorry. But it's like so in those situations, like you really don't know what's being said.
Okay.
And
What is that
so
like, out of curiosity? What does that feel like to either be completely gone or to, I almost think it would be more complicated to be there and stepping
yes
back
and
and
no. Um,
interacting? I mean, it's probably
so
hard to describe how it feels, but I'm just curious.
actually, no. So for me, it's super, super peaceful. Like I get into this state when I'm doing massage too, where sometimes, like you talked about the medicine woman who stepped in. Sometimes she'll step in while I'm in session and
Hmm.
she'll actually go through and like work on specific like meridians in the body. So like energetic pathways in the body, and she'll do some work. So I'll step out and I'll let them step in to do some healing work as well. And I recognized that that was happening years and years and years ago. And it was like I was sleeping. There were points in time
Mm.
where I thought maybe I was narcoleptic because I'm not kidding. Like, I really thought that I was falling asleep because there were whole sections of time that, like, I was aware that my body was moving and that I was doing things, but I um didn't feel like I was awake. Like
Okay.
it was like I was so peaceful and so relaxed that I was asleep.
So, like, when you're getting body work, and I know a lot of people have experienced this, like massage or body work, when you are so relaxed that you're like snoring, but you're awake and you're aware of it, you just
Yes.
are in a whole different plane of of understanding at the moment.
Yes.
I think people will understand that because there's certainly been times that people have told me that I'm so sorry I was snoring, like I was awake, but I'm like, nope, I totally get it. You're just
Yep.
that. So it's like being in there. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. It's like that. But then when you're channeling and you're actually present, um, it's interesting because sometimes, like Wind Eagle, one of my guides, he's the one that you were talking about who's gregarious and
Yes,
like
Wind
likes to
Eagle.
talk.
I like Wind
So
Eagle.
so do I. But he tends to call me out sometimes. So if I'm having a session with somebody and they're needing to hear a message that I'm also struggling with, he
Mm.
tends to call me out. Like to the person, he'll be like, well, Jen's working on this too because blah, 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 blah. Like, and he'll call me out. So if I'm present in the background, I'm like, would you knock it off? Like, and it's so sometimes I'm like, and he'll even say, Jen's going to be mad at me for this, or like, Jen doesn't like that I'm telling you this. However, both of you are on the same page
It
with
almost
this.
sounds like an older brother relationship.
Actually,
Like, I love you,
so
but also I'm gonna embarrass you in front of your friends.
yes. So he actually was my older brother in another lifetime.
Oh, that totally
So
makes sense.
yes. Yes. So for a long time I used to call him grandfather Wind Eagle.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one day I was channeling for somebody and he called it out. He's like, she calls me that just because she used to call me grandpa in our old lifetime, like because I was older. And so like for I didn't know. I didn't know why I called him that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I called him grandfather Wind Eagle. And so sometimes I just call him
So it was
grandfather.
like a jab in your other
Yeah.
life, like old
But
man.
I didn't know that. Like I thought
Oh,
it
that's
was like
funny.
respectful in this lifetime, and then he called it out in a session that was actually recorded. It was like in a group session and it was recorded. And I saw the recording later and I went, I didn't know. Like I had no idea.
Hmm.
And so now I don't call him that anymore. Sometimes it comes out. Some of the people who like I channeled to at the beginning, they still call him grandfather and he kind of laughs because that's
Okay.
how they were introduced to him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so so sometimes he'll call me out to other people because he knows that I won't listen. I don't always listen, just so everybody knows. Like I don't always listen to the guidance. I receive the guidance and sometimes I'm like, zip it. Like I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I'm not ready for this growth process right now. Just leave me.
And that's
So
kind of what we talked about before, too, is that was also interesting to me because you tend to believe it's kind of like the mediumship thing we were talking about. You tend to believe sometimes that people just have no choice,
yeah,
but you do actually have an active choice in all of this.
yeah,
Now, I know the way you've described it to me, basically, you always end up coming back around to that information. It's
yeah.
just not something that you're willing to process at the time.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. But so he'll call me out like in front of other people, partly because he knows that I will feel a sense of responsibility to take care of my stuff because I'm assisting other people in caring for theirs. So
Mm-hmm.
he knows me well enough because he's been my guide for a long time that sometimes I need a little bit more accountability,
Mm-hmm.
and calling me out gives me a little bit more accountability. So
Which is
that's,
another great thing that I think we should talk about another time because we've had a lot of discussions around this idea of like the pressure that healers, you could call them, or people who work in caring professions and stuff like that,
Mhm.
feel to put a face forward that they're always 100% with it. Like everything I'm preaching, I'm practicing, and I always have everything right, which I appreciate your honesty about the fact that no, I'm still a person who still has to deal with my own stuff too, no
Yeah.
matter what other
Yeah.
things I do to help people. Sometimes those messages are for me too.
Yeah. Well, if there's any healers out there who feel that way and they want Wind Eagle to come call you out in front of everybody, I'm sure he would do it for you. Like,
I am a little intimidated. I don't know that I want to give him permission to just call me out all the time. I feel like he'd be here a lot. You'd just be calling me like Wind Eagle wants to tell you something again. I'd be like, no, I don't want to hear it.
now you know where I'm at. No, so he'll call me out in front of people and I'm in the background going, "Hey, hey, mind your own business. Just mind your own business." Like, and he'll just keep talking. Just keep talking. And so it's like those moments that it's a little bit awkward for me. And there have been times, and I'll call myself out on this if I'm channeling for somebody, and for whatever reason, something triggers me to come fully back in my body. Like I'll start in with like I get tripped up in my words, and it's like I can feel like whoever's coming through trying to speak, and then my own language is getting wrapped up in it.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I'll pause and say, I need you guys to let them know that my channel's broken.
Okay.
Like that connection is broken. So usually they'll say, Jen needs a moment. The connection has been broken. Like she got distracted by something or whatever.
Kind of like what
So
you were
we need to
describing
pause.
before with the radio signals, like when you start to
Yes.
get interference and things get a little jumbled, or you hear more than one thing at a time.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes that'll happen too. Like if there's more than one person who wants to come through and speak, sometimes they'll speak over each other. And
Mm.
I'll be like, no, only room for one. Like I need you guys to choose who's coming through because this is just going to be a jumbled mess. So like I used to love not being in my body while I was channeling because then I could be like, nope, I'm not responsible for whatever they say. Like I don't know what they're saying, so like it's good. But now that I understand more fully, like sometimes the messages that they're giving are also things that I need to receive and I need to
Mm-hmm.
hear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I really like to hear it. I don't always hear all of it because sometimes, like I said, I'm arguing back and forth with them about whatever they're, no, don't talk about that. No, don't, I don't want to get into that. No. Um, but so it's been more beneficial for me to be present, but at the same time, I need to make sure that I understand like if my channel is starting to disintegrate, I call it out immediately because
Okay.
otherwise you are going to notice you're going to hear more ums and ahs come through me. You're going to hear my language coming through rather than the information, so it's not going to be as accurate because I
Okay.
don't know everything. But so I've learned to call myself out on that. And instead of like that stupid fake it till you make it thing, like I have seen
You really don't
channels.
like that.
No, I do not. I have seen channels though who you can tell when their channel's broken and they'll try to fake it until their channel comes back.
Mm,
And like as somebody who knows like how things change and how that channel works, sometimes it's like, okay, I'm gonna listen closely for what's truth in this and what's not.
yeah, that
Because I
would
can
seem very
see,
disingenuous.
yeah, because I can see that their channel's not quite as open as it was. Um, and it typically comes out when they like a lot of the time it's if they start talking about if they're channeling information that's a trigger for them.
Hmm.
Sometimes it will break your channel because it's like, nope, I can't deal with that right now. And so it's
Okay.
like an internal trigger that shuts them down.
Hmm. Just like a
Um,
trauma response that anyone would get
yep,
when
yep,
something triggers them to guard.
yeah, yeah. And like I said, I've had the same thing happen to me where it's like something happens and it brings me out of that state. And I've learned call it out immediately. Just say, hey, I need a break for a second. Like I need to come back into this space. Um, and then you just move on
I
because I
appreciate
am
that clarity,
human.
though. Yeah,
Yeah.
and like you said, you are human. Um,
Hmm.
I for something that would be probably hard for some people to accept that it's really happening. Um, I feel like that would make me a little more trusting if I knew that someone was just telling me right out, I don't have the same connection right now. I need a minute to figure this out. Rather than if I were to discover that they were kind of filling in the gaps until it came back.
Yep.
Which I can understand why someone would feel inclined to do that because you can certainly tell me if this is true in your case, but I imagine for being able to do things that people oftentimes either don't believe or sometimes can actually get really angry about,
Hmm.
proving yourself, quote unquote, is probably a big deal. Like
Yep.
appearing that you have everything together, that there's just not any mistakes in what you say. Nobody can call you out on any mistakes. Is that
Yep.
true? Is that
Oh yeah.
a
Oh
feeling?
yeah. Yeah. Well, I used to have nightmares and some of these are waking nightmares. Like this is a nightmare for me. Like that somebody's gonna all of a sudden come up to me one day and be like, channel so and so and like quote all of these things like I've thought about with like Jesus, quote the Bible to me. Like
Mm.
and so anybody who knows me knows that I have a really strong connection with Jesus. And like he'll tell me flat out, I'm not going to do that. I don't need to prove myself. You don't need to prove yourself. And most energy like beings are going to say that. They're not going to sit there and try to prove themselves to somebody who is in an egoic state. They have nothing to prove.
Mm.
So then I go into this space of, well, they're asking me to prove it. They don't believe me. And whoever, spirit, Jesus, whoever is coming forward is going to say, no, you don't need to prove anything. That's their own work to do. Like that's them standing in an ego
Hmm.
space. And so then the human part of me still pushes back and is like, no, because we need to prove that this is a real thing. We need to prove. And they're like, no, we don't need to prove anything. Eventually they'll learn the lesson, they'll figure it out, they'll see like what's real and what's not,
Hmm.
and they need to come to their own conclusion. You don't need to prove anything. So like my biggest nightmare is that somebody's going to ask me to prove it and spirit's going to say I ain't proving crap. Like I'm not doing it.
You know,
That's
that
not how
actually
this
brings up
works.
a good point about even like the mediumship piece of it too. Is I do think that people sometimes, so we all tend to believe that us and what's happening right now in this world on this earth is the most important thing. We tend to only understand what's in our bubble, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we forget that people who have passed and, are now another form, as well as any of these other entities you're talking about, they are not there for your beck and call.
Oh.
Like, they're not just waiting to talk to you all the time. And they're not, just like if someone came pounding on your door and is like, go tell this person all these things. If someone did that to me, I'd be like, screw you, buddy. I don't know who you are. Or even if I did, like, why didn't you call me first?
Yeah.
Like, don't
Yeah.
just show up and banging on my door.
Yeah. Maybe ask
But you
nicely.
forget that there's free will. Like, no matter
Yeah.
what plane you're in, there's always free will. And learning some respect, because I didn't see it that way as like being a disrespectful thing, but as you describe it more, it's like it's taught me to respect entities on any plane, that everybody has permission to not show up when you want them to, but show up when you need them to sometimes. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting way to describe it, because I do think people go into these experiences sometimes, especially with mediums, which I know, we're talking a little bit more about channeling, but with mediums, because they really want to talk to someone specific. And I do get that.
Yep.
But understanding that that's not necessarily the way this all works.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to call out something because we've used the word entity several times in this episode already. And I know that there are some people who that has a huge negative connotation to it. Like people think that like entities that are attached or like low vibrational, like we're not talking about like demons or attachments or entities like that. We're just the embodiment of an energy. So like a person or
Yeah,
a
I was just
being
using
or
it as an umbrella
yep.
statement, but yeah, I didn't
Yep.
even think about that.
Yeah. So I
Because it's
wanted to put
easier
that
than
there
saying
because
like people or angels or guides
yes.
or
I just don't
collectives.
want people to like go to, oh, she's channeling entities. Oh my gosh. No, we're not talking about low vibrational stuff. We're not talking about demons. We're not talking about any of that. We're using that very
You're not
broad.
possessed.
Yeah, I'm not possessed. Thank goodness I'm not possessed. Actually, I was talking to somebody about possession this morning.
Interesting.
Yes. And to see somebody who is possessed is a very interesting thing, but that's a whole nother
Considering
topic.
the time of day that we're doing this, along with the fact that I know we were just in a meeting together, I don't. What do you start your day with? What, like 6 o'clock in the morning? You're like, I'm going to talk about possession.
Well, you know the person that I was talking to about it. So, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
It was not you.
Had
It
a
was somebody else.
great
But
conversation before breakfast about possession.
yeah,
Sorry,
this is
go
my
ahead.
life. I don't know.
I love it. That's
Yeah.
what makes me so happy about it. I'm like, that's so interesting.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the other questions that you asked when you
Oh
were
gosh.
telling.
Whew,
Um,
now we have to circle back to all that stuff.
yeah, I know.
Okay,
I
so
will.
I was gonna ask a little bit more about the um Chinese medicine healer,
Yeah.
and have you describe a little bit more about her, and maybe talk more about who comes through frequently. I know you've
Okay.
listed a few entities out.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So sometimes there's I'll say people. There's people or energies that come through that I've never worked with before, but whoever I'm channeling for is very connected to um different like energy signatures or different planetary alignments. So extraterrestrials will come through. So I've worked with the Mantis Collective, which are beings of the insectoid race. So praying mantis people. Um,
What?
we're gonna get into the real woo stuff right now.
I
Um,
know. I can't wait to talk about aliens and have everyone be like, all right, I'm clicking off these crazy people.
No, nobody's gonna click off. They're just gonna get more curious. I have worked with a lot of different star seeds, so like a lot of different star beings have come forward. So again, more extraterrestrials have come forward. Um, I've worked with the Palladians before.
I'm
Again,
picturing the bridge of the Star Trek Enterprise. Just so everyone knows, I watched a lot of Star Trek The Next Generation. I'm picturing all these like interesting, this community of beings.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different beings out there, and there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of
Sure.
collectives. So I work with the Collective of Keturah, which is a divine feminine collective of energy beings that they specifically talk about like healthy touch and love and sensuality, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when people are having problems with self-love and connecting with other people, a lot of the time they'll come in and they'll talk about that.
That makes
Um,
sense.
I will connect with people's higher selves at times. I don't do that often.
Well,
Um,
now I feel extra special.
um, I don't know why I don't do that often, but sometimes
I just needed it,
I
I
don't know.
guess. My
I
higher
guess
self
so.
needed to be like, look, here's what you need. Mm.
Yeah, it happens every once in a while. I can think of less than a handful of people that I've channeled their higher selves. Um,
Maybe we should explain that briefly too. What is your higher self?
so your higher self is like your it, uh, so it's like your starting point. So it's your soul. It's your all of the information about you is encapsulated in this being, your higher self, who knows everything about you, who is there to guide you, who like is witnessing where you are in this human space. Um and just standing back and witnessing and then providing guidance and bringing you back to who you are as a soul. So they're like the person who pulls you back to who you actually are, pulls you back into your
Okay.
loving space. Um, so it's like you're the person who oversees you essentially. So it's who you
It's
are.
you at
Yeah.
your core. I think
Yeah.
describing it as your soul will make a lot of sense to a
Yeah.
lot of people.
Yeah. Hey, everybody, we got a little bit chatty on this episode. So we have broken it down into two different episodes. If you want to listen to the rest of it, come back next week and
Mm-hmm.
listen to episode 10. We will see you then. Mwah. Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe and check the show description for the links to the show. We would love to hear your thoughts below on this episode, as well as anything that you'd like us to talk about on future episodes. Remember, everybody, you are unique just the way you are, and that is why they call us Woo.
Mm-hmm.